What's good, y'all? Welcome back. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V, and this is episode 380. I am bringing you another season preview here. On this one, we're going to talk about a lot of 1A football, mostly in southern Colorado, but really all over the state, so it should be a good one. In case you're new to these season previews, what we do is that we will talk about every single 11-man football team in the state, but each episode we go around 10 to 15 teams an episode, and that's the same with this one. And for each team, we talk about last season, discuss departures, whether it's players moving or coaches leaving, or usually it's, for these levels, it's players graduating, but we mention all of it. Then we talk about key players, and then we predict the upcoming season. I go through their schedule, talk about what I think will happen, and then also give y'all a window of wins, just a range of where I think teams will finish in during the regular season. So there you go there. And by the way, it is July 12th, 2024 when I'm recording this, so if there's any new information that comes out after this, I just have no idea about it, as there are some teams who have incomplete schedules as of right now, and we'll probably be filling those out. So there you go there. This will be my last season preview or full season preview episode, so make sure you check out the other ones where I talk about a number of southern Colorado teams and a lot of 3A teams as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it. So for this first team, we're going to go ahead and talk about Meeker. Last season, I predicted them to go 8-1 with the window of wins anywhere between 6 and 9. And they finished below where I predicted them to go. They went 5-3 in the regular season here. I want to say there was one game that was taken off here, and it was the Roaring Fork game. So there you go. But they replaced it with another team in Teton from Idaho, who they lost to 41-6. So that's kind of one win that went the other way. But you know what? Let's just talk about last season and go down the line here. To start, they would beat North Fork in a close one here. I didn't think it'd be this close, but they still beat them 36-35. Then they'd play Lyman. That would be a loss as expected, 28-7. But following that, they would go on a 4-game winning streak, beating Grand County from Utah 46-14. They would beat Cedaredge 33-0. Buena Vista they would beat 42-14. That's a pretty big win there, as that Buena Vista team was a lot more improved than I anticipated them to be, so that's a big win for them. But then they'd lose to Gunnison. That was a game that I thought that they would be able to win, as I thought it would be a physical game. Their front seven matches up really well, like arguably better than Gunnison's, and they just got blown out 30-6, so that's kind of wild. Then you had that Teton game, but then following that, they would go ahead and they would play Highland and Buena Vista here. Those would both be wins. They beat Highland 20-7 and Buena Vista 28-7. And with that, they would go ahead and make the playoffs here, where they would lose, unfortunately, in the first round to Lyman 28-7. Definitely not the worst. Lyman beat a lot of other teams by much more in these playoffs. So if you're Meeker, you kind of feel good about that, but definitely a little bit of a disappointing season. Just losing in that first round. And there were definitely some games that I felt like that were maybe a little bit more winnable. I feel like that Gunnison game just swung so violently the other way that I don't know. I thought maybe that was the game they would win. And then obviously you have Teton, who's not bad at all. That's a quality game right there, but you do drop that one. So kind of a tough season here. They did finish below expectations, but not quite like out of the neighborhood. They're only one game below the window of wins. So there you go. That's Meeker. But let's go ahead and talk about some seniors that they are graduating, as they do lose quite a bit. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. They graduate Ryan Sullivan at quarterback. He had a solid year, passing for 969 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 9 picks. They also graduate Wyatt Powers, who's their third leading rusher, with 416 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then also co-led in interceptions with 4. He also had added 21 tackles on defense. They graduate their lead receiver in Jace Mobley, who had 35 receptions for 474 yards and 2 touchdowns. On defense, he was the other co-leader in picks with 4, and then added on another 38 tackles. Now on the defensive side of the ball, we have a number of players who they will be losing that been contributors for a couple seasons now. Buzz Clatterbaugh is one of them. He was their lead tackler with 138 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks. They also lose Judd Harvey. He had 126 tackles and 9 tackles for loss. They also graduate Hayden Schultz. He was an all-PMC defensive tackle with 86. Altogether, they graduate 10 of their top 13 tacklers, almost their entire defense here, while losing a couple key pieces on offense. On offense, I think specifically it's worth noting that they lose a good majority of their offensive line. So Meeker is definitely going to be without some experience going into next season, but they do have a couple players here that should contribute and be big time, starting with Clay Crawford. Last season, he had a breakout year, rushing for 983 yards, 13 touchdowns, while tallying 36 tackles on defense. He's gonna probably be the main guy on offense this year, so look for him to continue to produce. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens without the line that he had in well, I guess last season, but I was going to say previous years, so we'll see what happens there. They also bring back Cade Blunt, though. He rushed for 464 yards and 6 touchdowns, while catching for 205 and 4, and he was one of their top tacklers with 100, one of the few returning here. He should be the other part of this offense that honestly runs the ball more anyways, so as long as they have these two, they're going to be in a pretty good spot as far as offensive production goes, and you can kind of build the rest of your team around that. And then last but not least, they bring back Saeed Rodriguez, incoming sophomore, at 51 tackles on defense as a freshman. He should be returning on a defense that is pretty severely inexperienced. But like I said, they bring back guys like Blunt, Crawford, and Rodriguez. You should feel pretty good about that. I expect both to probably play both sides of the ball. And, you know, for Meeker, they've been a consistently good program. It's going to be a little bit of an uphill climb. I wouldn't quite say a rebuilding year because you got players the caliber of Crawford and Blunt, but it is going to be a little bit more of a struggle compared to past seasons. Now, to start, they have a pretty tough schedule here in 2024. Their first couple games are really tough. To start, they play Centauri. I honestly think that's a loss. Centauri just returns more. They return more offensive production. They return more defensive players. I think that's a tough game to win if you're Meeker right at the start of the season, so I think that's a loss. Then they play Wiggins. That's another team that was really young last year. Now they return all those guys. I think that is probably a loss as well. Then they go to Gunnison. Gunnison, they still return Graydon Buchanan, and I think that could be a big issue. At the core of it, you know, you could say the last season's game should have been closer, but at the end of the day, they still had Graydon Buchanan, and so I just think that they are really going to struggle to stop him if last year's defense struggled to stop him, which I felt like was a pretty solid defense. So I don't love that matchup for them, honestly. Plus, they play at Gunnison, so there you go there. But then they play Grand County, Cedaredge, Roaring Fork. I think those are all wins. North Fork should probably be a win. They lose a lot, so I think they get them again this season. And then they play Grand Valley at the end. Sorry, by the way, Grand County, an out-of-state team. I believe they are from Utah, if I'm not mistaken, from Moab. Yep, that should still be a win over them. And then Grand Valley should be another win. And then they should play Olathe. If they have a team, they should play Olathe. And that should definitely be a win there. So there you go there. Meeker, at the very least, I think should win their league. I don't them just losing their league. So at the very least, they should make the playoffs. I think that's pretty much a guaranteed. But right now, I have them going 6-3 with the window of wins between 5 and 8. Meeker loses a pretty formidable defense, but they return a talented trio of Crawford, Blunt, and Rodriguez. They have done more with less in the past, and it helps that the rest of their league is graduating a good amount as well. So even if they don't win those first couple games, which are tough, I still think they make the playoffs by winning the league. That should be their guaranteed ticket. Now, teams like Centauri, Wiggins, Gunnison, those are all really tough teams that I think are going to make the playoffs in their respective classifications, as Gunnison is now in 2A. And Centauri and Wiggins, I think, should both make the playoffs as well here in 1A. I don't know if Meeker is on that caliber yet. of a playoff team. But if they do win, I do think that sends a pretty clear message moving forward that they'll at least be better than just a league winner, right? They could definitely beat other teams from other leagues here, from tougher leagues here, and I think that is something to definitely keep in mind moving forward. But regardless, it still should be a solid year for Meeker as they go back to the playoffs. Anything more than that, it's going to take a lot more from the defense and from other players for them to contribute and do better compared to last season. All right, now up next we have Roaring Fork, and last season they did not have a varsity squad because of when they predicted that they would not have a varsity team. I believe that they are allowed to have one this season, so they will be back. Last season though, I didn't exactly predict them to have a great one. I only had them winning between 1 and 3 games, so I'm going to just count this prediction wrong here. But a lot of those varsity players that were going to play on this team last year have went over to Glenwood Springs, so I do think that's a pretty significant loss there. And so as far as graduating seniors, the Bullock brothers, I think you could count both of them, Zach and Max here. I believe Max is the older one, while Zach will be staying at Glenwood Springs, it looks like. And I think that's a pretty tough loss, as he is a big-time player for them, or was, when they were a program, or a varsity program the years before. So there you go there. They graduate those players as well as all the other seniors that moved over to Glenwood Springs from last season. And then as far as key players go, they have named a couple captains. Don't have a lot of stats for them, but I'm just going to name them off. Hunter Knoll, quarterback, wide receiver, safety. He will be a senior captain. Balaram Koss, lineman, linebacker, tight end. He's another senior captain. Sean Rodis, a senior center at captain. And then Ethan Gardner, I want to say, senior defensive end, offensive tackle. He will be a captain. So those are your 4 key players here moving forward for Roaring Fork. Now, let's just go ahead and look at the schedule. I don't think it's going to be a super competitive year for them. They got a lot of rebuilding to do. I guess they didn't have a bad JV season, but that is very much different from a varsity season. So just looking at their schedule, here's what they got. They got Ellicott. I think that's a loss. They're a little bit more established than Roaring Fork, in my opinion. And while they do graduate some key players like their quarterback, who happen to be their best athlete, I do think that they bring back a lot of other players, and I just trust their process a little bit more. Plus, they played a varsity season last year, so I think that's a loss. Yuma, I think, is a loss. Del Norte, I think, is a loss. Then they play Prospect Ridge Academy. This is arguably one of the worst schools, football schools or football teams in Colorado. I think this is a winnable game, so I'm going to give it to them. Then they play Grand Valley, Meeker. I think those are all losses there. Olathe, shoot, man. I kind of think they could beat Olathe. Originally, I had this as a loss, but I think I'm going to call it a win here. So they beat Olathe, and then they play Cedaredge and North Fork. They are not beating, I don't think. So there you go there. All together, I have them going 2-7 with a window of wins anywhere between 0 and 4. Look, they're a rebuilding program, but luckily they do play some easier teams. I'm looking at Prospect Ridge, Olathe here. Even like Del Norte is not that bad of a matchup. Ellicott is not that bad of a matchup. But, we just really got to see what they have, how good these players could be. There's not a lot of film out there on them, first off, either. And even if there was, it would be JV film. So we just got to see what happens moving forward here as they do look to prove themselves on the varsity level, returning in 2024. Alright, now we're going to talk about Olathe. This is going to be very short. They did not have a varsity season last year, but even in the years before, they've been really bad. I do not think that they have won multiple games since, here, let me just take a look here. Well, since Tyler Vincent has taken over as head coach. Their last multiple win season was under Ryan Korn, where they went 2-5 back in the COVID year, I'm pretty sure, 2020. So there you go there. And I guess this program has just not recovered since the pandemic since. And just going into this season, I mean, they're going to have a varsity team, at least as of right now. There is a varsity schedule. We'll see if they play it. But I do not think that they win a game at all this season. I mean, it's hard already as is to come back from not having a varsity year last season, so it's been 2 years since their players have played varsity competition. But even then, I mean, there have been talks about there being issues with getting players to come out and play and participation and whatnot. And I think that is a much deeper cultural level when it comes down to it at the very end. So I don't know. I'd be happy if they proved me wrong, but I need to see it before I believe it. So there you go there. I don't know if Olathe's winning a game this season, so I have them going 0-9. If they do win a game, there's only maybe a handful of teams in the state that they could beat, so I'll just give them a window of wins between 0 and 2, and we'll go from there. Moving on, though, let's go ahead and talk about North Fork last season. I predicted them to go 6-3 with the window of wins between 5 and 8, and they basically went that. They were going to play Roaring Fork, but they just dropped that game, and they went 5-3. And so let's talk about 2023 here. To start, they would beat Ignacio 45-6. Then they'd lose a tough one to Meeker 36-35 there, which was expected. I did think it'd be a closer game, but ultimately one that they would lose. So there you go. But then they beat Center 48-6. Grand Valley 42-16, Montezuma Cortez 45-14, Cedaredge 35-25. Then they played Monte Vista pretty close before losing to them 14-7, before losing to Gunnison in a relatively close one 35-21. I think the only game that was a little bit different here was that I originally had them losing to Montezuma Cortez. They beat them, and then I had them beating Gunnison, so you kind of just flipped those two. But either way, it was good enough for them to make the playoffs, where they would fall to Strasburg in the first round 21-0. That would be a team that would go to state, though, so definitely not the worst loss. But talking about some graduating seniors, they lose a lot, including the Marino brothers. Let's start with Hunter. He had a healthy season this year, passing for 481 yards, 5 touchdowns to 9 picks, while rushing for 126 yards and a touchdown. It looked like he was healthy, but unfortunately just had a really bad down year. On defense, he contributed 37 tackles and 2 picks, but like I said, just not the best year offensively. Then for Hayden Marino, unfortunately this year, his senior year got short. Last year it was Hunter's year, and I mean, this season, before it got cut short, he only played 5 games, but he rushed for 610 yards and 7 touchdowns. And we just never really got to see the Marino brothers at full health with full opportunities on varsity, which feels like such a waste, but it's just so disappointing for both of them. So wishing the best of health for those 2 players moving forward, as they were really talented. They also lose Daniel Owens. He ended up being their lead rusher with 780 yards and 9 touchdowns, adding on another 54 tackles on defense. They graduate Lane Allen as well, their fullback, who contributed in the place of Marino and did a solid job, rushing for 630 yards and 7 touchdowns. On the defensive end, also had 55 tackles and 8 tackles for loss. And then they lose their lead tackler, or one of them, in Josiah Peters, who had 56. Altogether, they lose all those players on offense, a couple leading rushers, a quarterback, and then they also graduate 7 of their top 13 tacklers, but do graduate their top 5 tacklers. So that's a lot of leadership to be losing for this squad. But let's talk about some key players here, starting with Joe Holenbeek, related to Colson Holenbeek, I assume. But last season had a pretty good year as a sophomore with 53 tackles and 3 sacks. He's going to be one of the returners on this defense, which is losing just below half, or just over half their team, but return just below half the squad. So for him to come back should be big time. They also return Payson Payne, I want to say. He had a tough injury-riddled year, only playing 4 games as a junior, but he did contribute 20 tackles and 3 picks. The year before, he had 50. So hopefully, if he could stay healthy, that'll be another big part of that defense. And then they returned Skylar Anderson, the 6'3", 180-pound athlete, had the most receiving yards with 167 yards and 2 touchdowns on 11 receptions. Only played 6 games, though. So there you go there. I think North Fork's strength is definitely going to lie on that defense here, just leaning on them as they do return the most experience on that squad, and you got to feel good about that. Offensively, they got a lot of places where they got to reload. Last season, I mean, these last couple years, they've always found players to contribute, so I'm not super nervous about it, but they are inexperienced, so there you go. But let's talk about 2024. Let's predict this upcoming season. To start, they play Center. That really should be a win. But then they play Monte Vista. I think that's a loss here, and we'll talk about Monte Vista later, but they just return so much firepower on both sides of the ball. I think that's going to prove to be a mismatch. Then they play Banning Lewis Academy and Gunnison. I mean, those are just more teams who have some key players that I think might be difficult for them to stop. Banning Lewis as Chase Real, Gunnison as Graydon Buchanan, and then obviously they have other players surrounding them. I think those are both losses as well. They're just established too. But then they play Olathe. That should be a win. Cedaredge should be a win. Meeker, I think, is probably a loss. Then Grand Valley, Roaring Fork should all be wins. So right now I have them going 4-5 with the window of wins between 3 and 6. North Fork has had some unlucky and unhealthy seasons as of recently, and it doesn't help that they will be graduating so much of their core from the last couple years. That being said, their league is not super strong, and so they will have plenty of games to develop, but it's hard to expect them to beat any playoff caliber teams. If they do and they take a step forward, I'm welcome to them to prove me wrong, obviously, but they got a lot of proving to do regardless, so we'll just have to see what happens. Now, if they get to 500, they're going to have to beat one of these playoff teams, and if they do, that should be their ticket to the playoffs, or at least a probable route into the playoffs. I think the only guaranteed one is if they beat Meeker. If they beat them, then they for sure make the playoffs, in my opinion. So there you go. That's assuming they win their league. But we'll just have to see what happens for North Fork. Like I said, this is a program that has consistently had a solid year. They haven't had any real bad seasons, I feel, but they are losing a lot. So we'll just have to see what happens here in 2024. Okay, now moving on, we have Jefferson. Last season, I predicted them to go 2-7, and they went exactly that. So let's go ahead and go down the line on their schedule from 2023. To start, they would get blown out by Manual, Banning Lewis Academy, Flatirons, would bounce back with a win over Sheridan 44-0, then lose kind of a tough one to Platte Canyon 32-22, then get beat by Middle Park 48-20, come back with a win over Clear Creek 32-18, then lose to Strasburg 65-0 and Denver Christian 37-6. Not too many surprises. As far as graduating seniors go, I don't think they had any seniors listed on the roster, none that I could find, but I will say this, Sebastian Torres-Mea, he was not a senior, but was not listed on the roster last season. So I don't know if he's on the team or not. Just going to be honest there. But he was a big-time producer for them at linebacker, gaining over 100 tackles, I'm pretty sure. So that's kind of a tough loss, but they played without him last year, and so they're going to be moving on here. Let's talk about the key players they bring back. I think it's worth noting they should probably bring back everyone who played last year, but who knows, maybe more players drop. But as of right now, they have Demetrius Martinez in his second year starting at quarterback. He had a slightly better season, passing for 1,981 yards, 3 touchdowns to 13 picks, though, on 67% completion, while rushing for 942 and 2 touchdowns. While the turnovers is definitely still a problem, he is an engine to this offense, at least moving the ball, so there's that. Also on defense at 96 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks as their second leading tackler. For this team to get better, I mean, he just has to not turn over the ball. It comes down to that. So there you go. Now they also bring back Enzo Hernandez. He was their lead tackler with 101 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, and 16 sacks. Obviously, their sack leader as well. It's going to be on him to help lead this defense moving forward, as they all just kind of hope to continue to improve together. I mean, there's no continuity being lost. They should have everyone from last season moving on. So We'll just have to see what happens, but let's talk about the fall here. To start, they play Alameda. I think that's a win. Then they play Littleton. I think that could potentially be a win here. They do lose a lot of size, but I'm going to call it a loss for now. That is in Littleton, by the way, too. But then they play Prospect Ridge Academy. That should be a win. But following that, they play Denver West, which is a loss. The Pinnacle, I don't think is a competitive game yet, so that's a loss. Platte Valley's a loss, Highland's a loss, and Manual, even though they're losing a lot, will be a loss. They also have a TBA to be announced opponent here, but they haven't announced it yet as of right now, July 12th, so I'm just not going to call that anything. So as of right now, I have them going 2-7 with a window of wins between 0 and 4. While I respect them putting in stats and whatnot, this team cannot be a winning team with just 2 big-time star players or contributors. First off, they just have to have a little bit more commitment from everyone else. There has to be other players who step up eventually. It's been like 2 years, right? So, and it's basically the same group these last couple years. So hopefully they take a step forward. Most of these players are not that young anymore. They have experience under their belt. So a little bit more is expected out of them. But you know what? We'll just have to see. Right now, I have them guaranteed winning 2 games pretty much. I think there is a chance they lose both of those games for one reason or another. We'll just see. But at max, I have them winning maybe 4 games. Those other winnable games possibly being that TBA game. And then I'd say either the Pinnacle or Littleton. We'll just have to see what happens, though, for Jefferson. And hopefully they continue to improve. All right, now up next, we're going to talk about Cedaredge. I originally predicted them to go 5-4 with the window of wins between 3 and 5, but they unfortunately finished on the lower end of things. Finished 3-4, just below where I thought they would be. Still within the window of wins, though. Let's talk about last season. So they would start with a 3-game winning streak, which would be pretty promising, beating Payton 21-0, Grand Valley 31-8, Del Norte 41-0, and then go on a 4-game losing streak, losing to North Fork 35-25, Meeker 33-0, Gunnison 38-14, Monte Vista 39-20, and surprising enough, that was good enough for them to make the playoffs at 3-4. Not only is it a losing record, but it's also like the least amount of games any team has played in 1A. So they make it and they get blown out by Lyman 42-7. So very interesting, very questionable 16th seed. I guess that's just how RPI shook out for them. So there you go. They do graduate some seniors here. Not a lot, but a couple here. Like Luke Maxey. He was their starting quarterback for a couple years. And he struggled a bit this season, passing for 858 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. Rushing for 144 and 3. He was a 3-year starter, like I said, and a big reason they were so productive on offense. But it seemed like he regressed a little bit last season anyways. He's still going to be missed as he's a big-time leader, a 3-year starter for them. They also graduate Logan Tullis, another guy who's been around for a minute. He was their lead rusher with 466 yards and 2 touchdowns, while being their second lead receiver with 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had 18 tackles and a pick on defense, so that's a tough one to lose. Altogether, they only graduate 3 of their top 13 tacklers on defense. I do believe that includes Maxey and Tullis there, but return the majority of their defense and pretty much everyone else on offense, so not too bad here going into 2024. Now in 2024, they have Brady Cooper to rely on. He was their best athlete. He was their lead receiver with 28 receptions for 416 yards and 2 touchdowns, while getting 14 tackles and a pick. Moving forward, they're going to have to try to build their offense around him if they want immediate success. He's the only one to have thrown a varsity pass on this roster too, so maybe he plays quarterback. We'll just have to see. They also bring back Ethan Toothaker, I want to say, or Toothaker. He was their second leading rusher with 264 yards and 4 touchdowns. And was second on the team in tackles. If anything, this defense will be experienced and he can help lead that defense to take a load off of the offense. And then they also bring back Wiley Lorimer. He was their lead tackler, or one of their lead tacklers with 27. Will be an incoming senior, and like I said, will help this defense hopefully win them some games. Now, they're not totally devoid of talent on the offensive side. They do got some players. Were they super productive last season? Not really. So they do got to take a step forward for sure. And then defensively, you kind of just hope they take a step forward as well. But to start, They have 4 pretty winnable games here still. Some of them might be closer, but I do think these are all winnable. In Ignacio, Coleridge, Center, and Del Norte, I don't think they lose any of those. I do think they lose to Meeker and probably North Fork. That North Fork game could be close, but I don't know. I don't think it will be. It's been a while since they've beaten North Fork, and North Fork still returns a good amount of players, so I don't think that they beat him. I think they also lose to Grand Valley as well. But then they play Roaring Fork and Olathe allegedly here, and so I think those are both wins. So right now, I have Cedaredge going 6-3 with the window of wins between 4 and 7. This isn't that bad of a prediction, considering they are losing 2 high productive players, but they do play a much weaker schedule than before in a much weaker league. The defense returning for them is a very big plus, and they have a great athlete in Brady Cooper to work with, so it's not the worst situation. While I'd be surprised if they made the playoffs, slightly surprised at least, they should win a solid amount of games. And actually, I wouldn't be that surprised if they made the playoffs. If they could keep that point differential between North Fork, Meeker, and Grand Valley on the smaller side, they could definitely still make the playoffs. If they beat one of those teams, I think they for sure make the playoffs, assuming they take care of business elsewhere. But it should be a solid year for Cedaredge. You know, they got an experienced team. I think the bigger question is on the offense. What are they going to do with Brady Cooper? And how is everyone else going to contribute in that system? We'll just have to see what happens here in the fall. All right, moving on, let's go ahead and talk about Centauri here last season. With the record, or I guess schedule that they had at the time, I predicted them to have a record of 8-0 with a window of wins between 7 and 10. Their schedule was not yet complete there. In the regular season, though, they would go 7-2, obviously adding on one more game, but still within the window of wins. Let's talk about last season. To start, they played Pagosa Springs. This was honestly a game that I thought they would win, but they dropped this one in a close one, 20-16. So there you go there. But then they would beat Florence as expected, 13-0. I had them beating Monte Vista, but they did not. They lost another close one to them, which is just tough, 14-12. But then would bounce back and go on a winning streak here, beating Bayfield 41-16, Center 43-6, Del Norte 42-6, Trinidad 63-0, Ignacio 38-6, and then they would just blow out Monte Vista here 45-0, which is kind of surprising, I feel, in some ways, but they would go ahead and win their league, and that would punch them a ticket to the playoffs, where unfortunately they would pull Ray, a really tough Ray squad, where they would lose to them 59-27. Altogether, not too bad of a season for Centauri here. I think you probably wish you went farther in the playoffs. Not a bad appearance against a really strong Raid team, so there you go. Now, they do graduate some really good players here, though, starting with Devin Brady. After a tough knee injury his junior year, he was eased in his senior year and ended up rushing for 493 yards and 7 touchdowns, while being their lead receiver with 13 receptions for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. He would end up being an all-PMC corner, though, racking up 82 tackles and 2 picks, and ended up having a pretty good senior year. Obviously not at the peak of where he was just a couple years ago, but still a very good year, and that's definitely a player that they are going to miss. They are also probably going to miss Josh Polkowski. He was their lead tackler with 126 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks, all from his linebacker spot. So that's a tough producer to lose. They'll also lose another linebacker and guard for them, Troy Huffaker. The 6'2", 220-pound player had 119 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss as their second leading tackler, and was just a good 3-year varsity starter for them. So losing to him is definitely tough. They also graduate Chaz Holman. The previous year, he was an all-PMC cornerback and a potential wideout candidate, but an unfortunate injury at the start of the season would rob him of his senior year. So that's a tough player to lose. But altogether, just looking at the stats, defensively, they do graduate 7 of their top 13 tacklers. That does include 6 of their top 10 tacklers, just losing a lot of established leadership there on that side of the ball. So that's going to be tough to replace, but they do bring back a lot of offensive firepower and at least half of those defensive players, half of that defense. So let's talk about it. To start, they bring back Parker Burr. The incoming senior was their lead rusher with 852 yards and 15 touchdowns. Also caught 6 receptions for 122 and a touchdown. And then our defense had 57 tackles. He will be their best athlete going into next year, I believe, and just will be one of the better workhorses on the 1A level. Those numbers should definitely go up quite a bit. They also bring back Sean Jarvis. The incoming junior passed for 1,055 yards, 12 touchdowns, 8 picks on 53% completion. Not too bad considering it was his first year starting as an underclassman, but the hope is that he develops and takes a step forward. He will have Burr to rely on, but if Jarvis can get going, then Centauri's offense will be tough to stop again and maybe look closer to what the fast break Falcons was all those years ago when they won state. I'm not saying they will be, but if they could get closer to that form, that would be a good step for them. They also bring back Kason Johnson, the incoming senior, had a very promising start to his season before an injury would wipe it out. He rushed for 322 yards in 4 games, including a 124-yard performance against Pagosa Springs. He definitely could help fill the void of Devin Brady by bouncing back for his senior season and do something similar to what Brady did. That would be a huge help in addition to a Parker Burr. And then they returned Carson Shawcroft as well, the younger brother, I assume, of former state champ Byron. He was their second lead receiver with 174 yards and 2 touchdowns on 8 receptions. And then on defense had 51 tackles and I think Triled with 2 other guys with 3 interceptions on this team. He's another good athlete to add to this arsenal. Could probably take on a bigger role on offense, but defensively, him coming back is very important as well. And then last but not least, they bring back Marcos Atencio. The incoming junior had a solid year, racking up 43 tackles and 3 picks. Also has some solid speed there. He could definitely fill in some roles for Centauri. So altogether, not too bad. Centauri does lose some size here. I think that's for sure, but they bring back some really good talent, some proven talent, and if they could stay healthy, this could be a sneaky good team here. I think for sure a playoff team. As of right now, their schedule is not all the way filled out, but I did my best with who I know is in their league and who have they scheduled now. To start, they play Meeker. I think they beat Meeker early on in this season, so that would be a big confidence boost there. Then they play Center. That should be a win. Bayfield should probably be a win. Ignacio should be a win. Monte Vista, they play at the very end of the season. I think that is the one team that could beat them. That's a loss here. That team's really going to test this defense. Now, I don't think it's impossible for them to win. I know it's away, but they could definitely win it. I think it's not a 50-50 chance, probably closer to 60-40, 55, something, right, 45 in that one. I do think they have a chance. There's a world where they do beat him, but this defense has to play, I don't want to say better, but, they got to look good, right, going into that game and play well going into that game, as they do lose some pretty significant experience. So, we'll see. I'm going to call it a loss for now, just playing it safe, but this is definitely a winnable game. And then they will play Trinidad and Del Norte. Those should all be wins there. So right now, I have Centauri going 6-1, but I'll give them a window of wins between 5 and 9 as of the 12th of July, which is today. They only have 7 games scheduled. If they schedule 3 more games, I'm just going to assume those are more potential wins, so I'm going to put them at a potential of 9 wins here. But Centauri, they're losing some significant leadership on the defensive side of the ball, but their offense is closer to being intact, and I think that's really important, as they were pretty good last season. They returned some really good options. There's going to be a lot of juniors stepping up next year, or I guess this season, but knowing their culture, they're going to be ready. They play in an easier league with Monte Vista being the wild card here, but don't get it twisted. Centauri should have a good team, and they should make the playoffs. Now, how far they go, I think depends on how big of a step this offense takes forward and how good this defense is, despite losing all of their leadership. I mean, their top tacklers and whatnot, and a lot of their leadership. Maybe not all, but a lot of their leadership is gone on that side of the ball. So you're going to have to look to other players to step up and lead and be a dominant defense. So we'll just have to see what happens for Centauri here. But I don't think there's any doubt that they are a playoff team in 2024. All right, now moving on, we have Ignacio, and this is so frustrating, dude. They went 4-5. They scheduled Wingate from New Mexico kind of out of nowhere and beat them 46-0. And so I predicted their schedule as clearly as I could. I had them going 3-4 with the window of wins between 2 and 5. Obviously, that added win there with the Wingate, kind of helps them out. So there you go. But their schedule went as predicted. Let me just go down the line actually and talk about what happened here in 2023. But lost to North Fork 45-6, Grand County 42-30, beat that Wingate team. Then lost to Montezuma and Cortez, only 24-0. And then beat Trinidad 55-0, Center 53-18, and then dropped games against Monte Vista 42-7, Centauri 38-6, and then beat down Norte at the end 14-6. So all big time there. Now for the second straight year, they have no stats, so I'm just not going to be able to talk about their players. It's really annoying, but I guess it is what it is. So let's just go ahead and predict this upcoming season here based on past experience. And man, it's so annoying. Just post stats and they don't post film either, so it just puts us in a tough spot. But they're gonna lose to Manual, who they play at the beginning of the season. They play at Manual. Cedaredge is a loss. Olathe, if they have a team, they win. Bayfield is probably a loss though. Centauri's a loss. Trinidad is a win. Center, if they have a team, is a win. Monte Vista is a loss. And then I've been going back and forth on Del Norte. I think I'm going to actually call that one a loss. I know last year was pretty close. Actually, I don't know. This one is really a toss-up game, in my opinion. Well, you know what? I'm just going to call it a loss. I'm going to call it a loss. Last season was really close, but I do really like what they bring back. So, there you go. But right now, I have them going 3-6 with the window of wins between 3 and 6. I think they have pretty much 3 guaranteed wins here, probably, with Olathe, Trinidad, Center. That's no disrespect. That's just based on past history. So there you go. If they were to win 3 more games, maybe Bayfield, maybe Del Norte, and then I don't know. I don't think Manual is going to be that bad, but maybe they shock Manual. That'd be wild, though. I don't think that's going to happen, though. So there you go. But like I said, literally no stats. It'd be great if they uploaded something to go off of outside of their schedule. So there you go. But that's Ignacio. We're just going to move on. All right, so we're going to talk about Center next. I had them going 3-4 with the window of wins between 3 and 6, and they just did not have a good year. They went 1-8 with their only win being over Trinidad 49-0. Everything else, and I mean, there were wins like I thought they beat down Norte or Payton, but they lost everything else. I mean, let me just go down the line. With 2 blowouts, one against North Fork 48-6, the other against Platte Canyon 40-6. They lose at Payton 26-14. That was one of their closer losses of the season. Then they lose to Ride 42-14, Centauri 43-6, Ignacio 53-18. Down Norte was kind of a close game, 14-12, but then they got blown out by Monte Vista after that 58-6, and then they had their win. One win over Trinidad right at the end, 49-0. So just not a great season. Looking at the stats, these are very incomplete. Just not like a great job with these. There's only 1 game listed, so not a lot to go off of, but I do know they're losing Jesus Valdez. He was their starting quarterback, and Luis Valdez, their starting receiver, so that's tough. Now, as far as key players go, there's one that I'm looking at specifically, and that's Caden Ruggles, who I think is the brother of Cale Ruggles, and it looked like he had a solid year. Like I said, I don't know, and part of that is because they did have a new head coach in Bob Fredericken? I think I'm saying that wrong, but Bob Fredericken, I want to say. Excuse me if I'm saying that wrong. So hopefully this year they are doing a better job at keeping those stats and whatnot, because there's also no film at all. So that's great. But with that being said, let's predict this upcoming year here. North Fork, Cedaredge, I think, are both losses. Olathe, I think they could definitely beat if they have a varsity season. Ellicott, I think, could be another close win as well. Not going to lie. I'm going to call it a loss, though. It is at Ellicott, so there's that. Centauri's a loss. Monte Vista is a loss. Ignacio is probably still a loss. Now, Norte, I do think it'll be closer. Potentially, right? Potentially. But I still think it's a loss. And then Trinidad right at the end. That should be a win. By the way, they also have Monte Vista on here twice. That's obviously not going to happen, so they probably replaced them with someone else. But as of right now, I have them going 2-7 with the window of wins between 1 and 4. There's just not a lot of info on center. I do like kind of, I guess, some of the stats I saw from Caden Ruggles, but that's not really saying a lot. So we're just going to have to see what happens going into 2024. I'm partially going off of past history, how they've done against these teams last year and the year before. So, yeah, I mean, losing their quarterback and top receiver, I think, is really tough. I think it is fair to say that I am skeptical about how this upcoming season will go. But, you know, I'm open to being wrong. We'll just have to see what happens. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Del Norte here. Last season, I had them going 2-6 with the window of wins between 2 and 4, and they're right in the middle of those window of wins, going 3-6, winning one more game than I expected. And so let's just go down the line, talk about their schedule. Lost to Gunnison, as expected, though, 49-0. Beat Rocky Ford, though, 48-12. Cedaredge was a loss, 41-0. Salida, they lost, though, 30-12. Monte Vista, blowout loss, 62-18. Centauri, 42-6. Beat Center, which was a good win, 14-12. Trinidad was a loss, 36-0. And then lost a close one to Ignacio, 14-6 here. So not too bad a season, overachieving. Now let's talk about some graduating seniors. The first one, I don't know why I thought he was a senior the year before, but it's Jace Pacheco. He was their starting quarterback, and last season threw for 1,219 yards, 14 touchdowns, 8 picks, while rushing for 115 and 1. I mean, he was a solid quarterback for them, so he's definitely going to be missed. They also graduated Cody Warris. He was their main skill player, and he caught 31 receptions for 514 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then on defense, at 37 tackles and a pick. They also graduate Craig Williams, their 6'4", 210-pound defender, was their lead tackler with 75 tackles. On defense, only graduate 5 of their top 13 players, and honestly, not losing too many players all around. Losing your quarterback's definitely tough, though. They do bring back a lot of other players, like Kelby Mondragon. He was their lead rusher with 357 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also catching 26 receptions for 201 yards and a touchdown, and contributing 52 tackles and 2 picks on defense. Last year, he was their best athlete, and this year, I think he should still be their best athlete and attract a lot of attention. He's only an incoming junior too, by the way, so he's only getting better. So there you go there. I'm really excited for him moving forward for Del Norte. They also bring back Paul Neal. The fellow incoming junior had 14 receptions, 497 yards and 3 touchdowns, while having 32 tackles. He had a solid freshman year as well, and he's definitely another athlete that should be a big-time contributor for them moving forward. They have some solid size up front with Calvin Quintana and Samuel Sierra here. Sierra, only an incoming junior, but was 6'1", 245 last year. Quintana, he's also going to be an incoming junior, 6'3", 225, listed at that. So some good size for both of them coming back. And it does look like they have a newish head coach. Maybe their max preps is just wrong, though. I will acknowledge that. But Richie Madrid is currently listed as their head coach. The last 2 years, 2 different coaches have been listed in Henry Castillo and Austin McDonald. Madrid coached recently, though, from 2017 to 2021. Back, most of that was when they were an 8-man team. And then 2 years in 11-man. Didn't find a lot of success, but, you know, definitely a familiar face coming back, so it could be a good thing for them. Now, their schedule is incomplete. I'm just going to throw that out there, but did what I could with finding their league and all that stuff. So let's just go down the line and predict their upcoming 2024 season. To start, they play Roaring Fork. I think that's a win right there. And then they play Cedaredge. I feel like this could be a closer game, but Cedaredge does return most of their defense plus Brady Cooper. So I'm going to say it's a loss for now. but I do kind of feel like it could be a closer game. Ignacio should be a win, though. After that, that's definitely a team they're going to have to play. Center is another team they're going to have to play in league. That should be a win. Monte Vista is currently listed for October 11th. I think that's a loss. Same with Centauri. I think that's another loss. And then Trinidad, they should definitely still be as well. And so I actually have them going 4-4 with the window of wins between 3 and 6. Although they do lose their quarterback, who they used relatively a lot. They do have a budding star, I think, in Mondragon and some solid size for the 1A level. With that being said, while I don't think they're a playoff team yet, they will definitely win a couple games this season based on the inexperience and talent level of other teams. But I am interested to see how far this Del Norte team can go, how far these players can develop going into this next season, and I think that's going to say a lot about where they land at the end of it. But at the very least, I do think they win at least 3 games. I'm looking at Trinidad Center and Roaring Fork being those wins. Ignacio, I think, could be a closer win, but I would still lean pretty comfortably towards Del Norte, though. But we'll just have to see how 2024 goes for this squad. All right, now, last but definitely not least, we have Monte Vista here that I want to talk about. Last season, predicted them to go 7-2 with the window wins between 5 and 8, and they went 6-3, finishing just 1 game below where I thought they would be. Dang, bars there, by the way. Rocky Ford, that was the first game they would play in 2023. That would be an easy win, 50-0. Then they dropped a game against Colorado Springs Christian. This was a game I thought they could win. This one just kind of got away from them, away too, by the way, and they lost 48-20. Then they lost to Gunnison, which I felt like was expected, 48-14. For going on a little bit of a winning streak here, 52-14 against Payton, 62-18 against Del Norte, 64-12 against Trinidad, 42-7 against Ignacio, 58-6 against Center, and then losing a really tough game against Centauri, 45-0. Although they went 6-3, they were just outside of the playoffs. Just a lot of games here where the margin was just too much, and that's obviously not a good thing as far as RPI goes. But not a bad season for a very young team. Let's talk about some of the players that do graduate, though. Starting with Jack Noonan, who was an all-PMC linebacker and tackle leader for them with 85. It was definitely a down year for him, but he helped lead a very young team. They also graduate Josiah Villagomez, one of the only other seniors to contribute that could be recorded through stats, that is. He had 28 tackles and 4 sacks as the co-sack leader. They do lose some pretty good size on the line with Donovan Neal and Jose Castro graduating. Who didn't have the most stats, but they still did their thing. Together, though, all those players included, they only graduate 2 of their top 13 tacklers, plus some linemen. So, not bad at all. They bring back everyone else, so this should be a very experienced group. They bring back Jacob Pacheco. He's an incoming senior running back who ran for 1,178 yards and 22 touchdowns while contributing 41 tackles on defense. He could be due for a potential MVP type year. They also bring back Kevin Cisneros. He will also be a senior, and he was their second leading rusher with 489 yards and 7 touchdowns and had 57 tackles and 2 picks on defense. The kid could be a part of this offense, he will be a key part of this offense going into next year and a good part of this defense as well. They also bring back Azariah Hurtado. The incoming junior was their lead receiver with 20 receptions for 342 yards and 8 touchdowns. He also had 52 tackles and led with 5 picks. He brings another dimension to this offense and is a key part of the secondary. He did have some drops last season, but if he could clean that up, he could definitely be a big-time receiver, a potential all-PMC receiver going into this year. And then they also returned Caden Madrid as a senior. The quarterback threw for 635 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 7 picks, and also had 23 tackles and 3 sacks on defense. But I think he could develop into a quarterback that could get them into state or at least be contending here in 1A again. I think there's a good chance of that. And then on top of that, I mean, they just returned some solid size all around here. It's not too bad at all. Riley Bonds will be coming back, I believe. They also return Joshua Salazar, who's another bigger player. So they will have some size going into next season here. It is unproven, though. I am a little worried about this offensive line, but not too worried at that. So we'll just have to see here. I do think, I don't know. I do think this offensive line could mean the difference between them playing well and not playing well. But historically, I feel like at least the last couple years, they've had good linemen no matter what. So we'll just have to see. But to start, they play Alamosa. I honestly think that this is a win here. They return an experienced defense. They have two really good running backs and a lot of firepower here. You know, they do return Dyson Woodward over there, but they lose Brant Jackson. They lose a couple players over there, actually. So I'm kind of led to believe that this is a very winnable game for Monte Vista here, and I am going to have them winning this game. I do think that it could go the other way, but playing Alamosa this early on is very favorable towards them, so there you go. Then they play Riot. That should be a win. They lose a lot there, including Dylan Herney. North Fork should be a win. Pagosa Springs doesn't have Gavin Lindahl anymore. That should be a win. Following that, they play Center, Del Norte, Trinidad, Ignacio, all wins there, as that confidence should build. And then they play Centauri. This will probably be one of their biggest challenges, especially because they play them at the end of the season. But they do play them at home. And I do think this is a team they could beat. They also lose some size over there as well. So I'm going to call it a win, but it could definitely go either way. But right now, I have Monte Vista going 9-0 with the window of wins between 7 and 10. They're extremely talented. Despite losing some size up front and their leading tackler, they return pretty much everyone else, which I think is very scary. They've always ran the ball well. I do think they have some solid size coming back. Add on that they have a relatively talented quarterback, a receiver in Azariah Hurtado that could make them even better. This could be a Monte Vista team who could be poised to make as good a run as any other squad. I also think that their schedule helps them out a lot, playing tougher teams like an Alamosa, Rye, North Fork, Pagosa Springs, who I think maybe not all, but all were playoff caliber teams last year, but they're graduating a lot. That puts them in a spot where they're going to be playing just teams that don't have as much experience. And so with that being said, I just like the experience that Monte Vista brings back much more than those teams, even if they might be better. Honestly, I'm looking at Alamosa specifically. So there you go. Even if they lose that game, though, I mean, they still go 8-1, maybe 7-2, and that's not even that bad here. They should make the playoffs regardless. Their league isn't that tough outside of Centauri, so that does make those 4 games pretty important as far as just seeing where they're at. And then that Centauri game will be very important for them as far as winning league goes and guaranteeing them a playoff spot. But, we'll just have to see what happens for Monte Vista. I do think this will be a big year for them, though, and you'll see these players that contributed last season take another step forward, and maybe some other breakout players come out and do a good job as well. We'll just have to see what happens here in 2024. But that'll wrap up this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Thank you so much for rocking with us. This is my last full season preview that I'm doing. I'm doing a half episode, with Cody later on this week, so make sure you check that out. And make sure you check out the other season previews ahead in Cody's, Gino's, and Gideon's. You could follow us on Playmakers Corner at all our social medias on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, /X, TikTok as well, where you'll get notified of when that content's going up. I will be posting some TikToks, some highlights from each of the teams I've covered here, the key teams I've covered moving forward. And, I know watch lists are coming out at the time as well, so make sure you look out for that. But thank you so much for rocking with us, and I'll catch you later.